he's not going to agree to this. Maybe I shouldn't push this. And so walking on eggshells, when I ask a client, what do you want? First answer I hear, and this is for me, an indicator that that spouse is in narcissistic, abusive relationship where they lost themselves because they cannot even really feel or answer what they want. So they go on to tell the story about what happened and justifying what they want, but without saying it.
Welcome back to another episode of Rewiring Health. So honored to have Diana Romanov on the podcast today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. And so this is something that I know is going to speak so much to women particularly. But before we get into diving in what we're going to talk about, do you mind just sharing your story and how you got into helping the people that you help?
Well, I've been there, done that. I have been a child of divorce. I divorced myself first time, happily married the second time, hopefully the last time. And I have seen the divorce from all perspectives. So in law school, I was interested, drawn to family law. As a child, I have seen how parents navigated the custody and visitation and the intricacies of their discussions that I overheard. And then as I was going through divorce, I also have been firsthand in it. And so I realized, my personal experience can come handy helping people understand them. So I remember the way I treated my lawyer, I'm not so proud of it. And when clients get emotional and they start being emotional with me, I have more compassion than I would otherwise have had if I didn't go through divorce myself and didn't experience that myself firsthand. So the lawyers are the next person where they can experience that emotional wave. And it's very important not to take things personally and allow the client to have the space to express their emotions, but also advise them to seek therapies.
Yeah, and it's such a sensitive topic, and there's so much emotion, I'm sure, behind it because of you have two lives that have come together and now are separating. And in that mix, I love to hear about your experience because so many women that listen to this get lost in dynamics of relationships. They once felt like they knew themselves, and then they are devoted to making things work and keeping things together at any cost. And unfortunately, a lot of it is the cost of their own inner peace. What's been your experience, maybe personally, or even just working with clients who have experienced that before?
Personally, when I was finishing my divorce, I felt that my entire me picture that I had was falling down as small pieces of puzzles. And when I started puzzling back, I realized the puzzle is no longer the puzzle I used to have. So I literally had to invent myself and create my own new puzzle, what I like, what I don't like, what I thought I liked because of my spouse. And so when I was going through divorce, and I see exactly the same pattern happening to my clients, where when I ask them, as we spoke earlier, when I ask them, what do you want? And I noticed that inner dialogue was in my head when I was going through divorce. Well, he's not going to agree to this. Maybe I shouldn't push this. And so walking on eggshells, when I ask a client, what do you want? First answer I hear, and this is for me, an indicator that that spouse is in narcissistic, abusive relationship where they lost themselves because they cannot even really feel or answer what they want. So they go on to tell the story about what happened and justifying what they want, but without saying it. And so I keep interrupting them and saying, look, we need to put your spouse, and I think this was something my therapist suggested, when someone takes up so much space, the other side, to put them in a glass bowl that is very thick and put them in the corner so they have a little space and they can do whatever they want in that corner, but they cannot come out of this little glass bowl so that when we have that discussion, they don't interfere in our discussion with what we are discussing, our space. So
Yeah.
that's important to not let the other side, and it's a process. It's not very easy to do because it's a pattern. Some people are married for 20 years, for 10 years, for 7 years. I have been married for 7 years, and even that was really, really hard to advocate for myself. And I remember my therapist said, "Are you advocating for you or for him?"
Yeah.
Because as a pleaser, as a compassionate person, I would like to make sure that the other person is not hurt. But there is no way, when people separate, I always hear this, well, the way she or he broke up with me. There's no nice way to break up.
Yeah.
Even the nicest way would be not the nicest way at the end of the day. So the bandage has to be ripped off, pulled off, nicely or not nicely, it's gonna hurt either way. Even this is, when I have a 5-year-old and when I don't even touch the bandage, she's already like, ah,
The anticipation.
anticipation. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
gonna hurt, but it needs to happen. And I was just talking to a client about nesting, when they're so in mediation mode and they're like, let's do nesting. We have 2 children. We have this house that we don't want to sell. I never seen nesting work. Never. Because what happens is you have one home and then each parent is renting another place to live. They have to coordinate not only children but the home on top of that. And then once they would like to get married, have partners, then it creates another layer of problems. So
Yeah.
just a side topic, I noticed that at some point bandage needs to be pulled off. That's
Yeah.
including nesting, including let's keep a business together, let's keep something else. So there is a reason why people are going through separation, divorce, because things are not working out. Because if they were working out, they wouldn't be separating.
Yeah, and trying to soften those edges can feel like it's
Yeah.
not so threatening when things are separating like in that way, and trying to hold on to almost like the past pieces that worked, even though if the majority of it is not working, it can feel
Yes,
like
and
you're still
and this
attached to that.
the saddest part I hear is when a client comes in and they have been married for 20 years and then they say, well, I will wait until our children are older, or, this has been loveless marriage for the last 10 years, but for the sake of the children, I got to stick it out. And the thing is, what they don't realize that children absorb the misery, they absorb the unhappiness. It's impossible to hide their detect for emotional. They have emotional sensors. I notice when something happens in the family where children act out, the first thing the therapist always says is, let's therapy the parents first, because the children are a ripple effect of the parental emotional state of mind. And so when children observing, even if parents think they can hide it, they can't. It's just like, it doesn't work that way. They can feel this aura of unhappiness. And so I would like to scream, don't stay if you unable to, through therapy, through self-development, to save the marriage for the sake of the children. Because they feel the guilt, they feel the misery, and then they will need another 30, 20 years of therapy to not attract the same type of dynamic, and realize that they're also in the same trap as they saw their parents interact, because children are mirroring the relationship they learned in their childhood.
And if that's the only thing they're exposed to, that's where those belief systems come in, and that's how it's supposed to be. And
Yeah,
really challenging. But yeah, you
exactly.
can see how so many people can get stuck in those patterns of trying to protect the kids from everything and that self-sacrifice. And What are some indicators that if someone is in those patterns and that divorce might be the better option for them instead of just continuing on those patterns of making it work for the sake of making it work?
Well, the indicators I see in my office is the one that I just mentioned when I cannot get through to a spouse about what they want. On the other side, if the indicator is the other spouse is so angry because they repressed their frustration for so long that now they go the way opposite of wanting to destroy the spouse, the cheating spouse, and give it to them and, fight at all costs. So that's the extreme of the passive aggressive or the victimization of personal condition of allowing. It's a tough tablet to take because partially by staying in a relationship that is not working out is accepting it, and so what happens is going repression, and then it goes the opposite way. So the victim feels, rightfully so, abused, and then so they file a restraining order or they retaliate and they stand up for themselves in a pendulum kind of way. So there is no balance in between. They go all in, take the children, move countries, and then the villain, let's say the cheating spouse or the angry spouse, goes also all in, fighting with spending all community property money on attorney's fees, fighting them either counter restraining order or another trial, custody evaluation. So these cases can get really, really, I'm talking extremes for the sake of this podcast. Of course, there are many, many cases that don't end up in my office. In fact, I hope that 70% of marriages are getting resolved in self-help center without an attorney. And I also have 70% of clients who are asking for help amicably resolving. And so there are these 20-30% I'm talking about. And maybe the extreme cases are more like 3%. But what are the indicators? Let me think. So another indicator would be where they just numbed out. Mm-hmm. They're like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Whatever, one client told me, if you send me one more email from the other attorney, I will commit suicide.
Oh, wow.
He was paying spousal support. He has been stayed in a marriage for 20 years, super unhappy, finally was able to stand up for himself. And then the other attorney was going after for more and more and more. And so what I did, I just didn't forward, and I would call him and we would talk gently about how to untangle this, and we resolved it in mediation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really, really challenging. And especially because of how much emotion is in those and all the nuances of relationships and how complex they can be. And it all comes at forefront when a lot of things are severed. And for someone who maybe has not protected themselves in the marriage and has been very sacrificial of themselves, when they get to the place where they're ready to divorce, how can they navigate that where they look out for the future version of themselves so that they're not continuing these patterns of self-sacrifice and that they are actually protecting themselves, maybe the assets or whatever, so they're not just relinquishing everything for the sake of doing that because that was the pattern they knew.
Quick advertisement. Mm-hmm. I wrote it in my book here, Divorce Like a Boss, Create Your Team. So first, have a forensic accountant. In order to divorce successfully like a boss, create your team. First, forensic accountant, co-parenting counselor, attorney, mediator. Who else could be? Tax attorney, financial advisor. So have a team, and I know it sounds great, but not all people can afford it. So if to pick one would be an attorney, an accountant, and a therapist. Because the mistakes that could happen, the delay that would happen will cost more. Mm. So talking to an attorney about the emotional piece costing more. making decisions that are emotionally driven. So, for example, if someone feels guilty because they were unfaithful, they tend to give more than and they regret, or they're afraid of litigation and give more because they're afraid of litigation. So these pieces can be worked out in a therapy. Accountant is important to understand the full picture. People think, oh, I know. And then it turns out that consecutively we look at the bank statement and see, oh, actually there was a couple years ago, just half a year before the date of separation, there was X amount of money transferred to that family member or to this family member, or something was transferred to a bank account that wasn't disclosed. So just looking at current bank statements is not always helpful, especially if the trust is broken and financial records have not been disclosed at all times and there was no tracking system. Having a forensic accountant just look through it. And when I say look through it, they have softwares. It's very automated. They're trained to do this. And with help of the AI, it's probably even simpler now. So just to have these three people, I would say, is a must to avoid costly mistakes.
Yeah.
Also suggest not to sign anything. I had in the last week, as I came back from vacation, a couple of clients who regretted they signed agreements when they didn't have a lawyer. They were emotionally drained. So the emotionally empty client who is sitting in the evening having tea with the other spouse, and the other spouse, here's all the assets we had. Don't pay expensive lawyers. They're just going to drain us out. They're going to take out college fund. Maybe true. Maybe some lawyers do. But here's the problem. That spouse hasn't disclosed transfers before the date of separation. Here all basically, this is all we have. Sign this and we can get this resolved. And so and then next thing you know, later, like a couple years later, that client calls me and is, well, I actually don't think I signed a good deal. It turns out I agreed to, let's say, cash buyout out of the stocks instead of getting the actual stock. And the stock price went 300%. And I would rather kept the stock. So, and there are little other things. Or I waived spousal support, or I agreed to 3 years of spousal support in a 20-year marriage when jurisdiction of California court, after 10 years, the court could retain jurisdiction for until death or retirement age, or basically they agreed to things that they should have known if they even had 1 hour consultation. And so what happened is emotional piece, feeling under pressure, feeling under influence by the other spouse, and then thinking they know what they want, and then not having a soundboard to even for half an hour to discuss with them.
Yeah. And especially when you're in the thick of it, you don't really see things clearly because you must want, a lot of times people just want to move past the pain, get it over with, and then run.
In fact, yesterday I sent an MSA to a client, and 5 minutes later, she says, sounds good, looks good. It's like 37 pages. I would need at least, a couple hours to read it, or 1 hour, but not 5 minutes. So I emailed that client back and I said, it sounds like you didn't read it. Because next thing that client asks is, well, what about retirement accounts? Are they included? You got to read this. This is it. This is the document this is the most important document after divorce.
Wow.
That will govern.
Yeah. How do you
But I want to be done. It's like,
Right.
yeah, but what price? And that's when people sign things they don't mean to sign.
Yeah. Yeah. And then long-term regret that, or look back and be like, I should have done that differently. And that can be such a terrible place to be in.
And then blame lawyers. Oh, you should have included this. But how would I know what I don't know what you want?
Gosh, that's so hard. And you can understand, like, I can understand if someone's going through that, like how overwhelming it could be and where you just feel like you don't have the mental capacity to do that. How do you help people slow down and really tune into themselves so that they make the right decision instead of like trying to rush through it and making those haphazard decisions in the process?
So words help,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
telling them. This is the most important piece of this divorce process. Please take your time. You know, we have been going through this for 1 year, so another hour of reading it is not gonna kill you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So take your time. I'm not rushing you. Just take your time and highlight things you don't understand.
Mhm.
Print it out or whatever best way works for you. Just put a question mark and then we have a brief call to go over things you don't understand.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I noticed that in prenups, people don't read prenups. They just, I want this, I want that, and then they don't read it, sign it, and then later they're like, oh shoot, I signed this. And now I had cases where two women, actually one after another, came to my office where a year or two before they signed the prenup, they didn't negotiate anything, and they married elderly spouse, and they were also in their age. And so what happened is the spouse died, and the heirs came to the house and kicked them out
Oh,
in
wow.
separate occasions. And
Mm.
so would have if they took the time to think about, okay, well, what
Mhm.
happens if, and this is my favorite part, what if?
Right.
Then would I want to stay in the house until I pass, or to discuss that with the spouse and create a trust, create a will? You know, doing this for a long time, I lost clients. And I remember one client, he wasn't feeling well, and he was in his 60s, pretty young. And I told him, I tell it to all my clients, have a will, have a will. So he did. And then he passed away a couple months later.
Mm.
So just planning it all in a way that feels right,
Mhm.
taking the emotions as much as possible out of this occasion. Look at it as a business partnership, right? When
Mhm.
we're going into the marriage, it's like a business partnership. Fiduciary duty applies. How would I, if something happened to me in a divorce, would I want the children to get the house? Would I want, in case of death, someone else to get the home? Think things through.
Yeah.
And the nastiest divorce cases I have are usually when they didn't know each other. When they
Mm.
start finding out about, after getting to know each other for a couple months, then getting pregnant, getting married, having children is more important than marrying the right person.
Mhm.
And so that's another red flag to watch out for, just not to rush. Sometimes I had a case that has been going on for years, very, very contentious custody case where, and I asked my client, why the heck did you marry this person? Well, my parents told me if I don't marry by age of 30, they will arrange the marriage.
Oh, wow.
So there's a cultural pressure, there is the female ticking clock pressure, there is lots of external pressures that create this immigration pressure, not having a
Yeah.
green card or wanting to stay. And there are lots of factors to consider.
Yeah.
And
Oh
it's
my
all
gosh.
good, but have a prenup. Don't
Mhm.
have
Yeah.
children. Just plan, give it some time, because then the children suffer at the end. If parents don't get along and they have restraining orders and they're not liking each other and they fight for years in court, it does affect children very much. So they act out, they need therapy. It's not good.
Yeah, and I'd love to go a little bit deeper on that because how do you navigate like balancing that of like advocating for yourself, helping yourself through that divorce proceedings and everything, but yet maybe not going so far that it is affecting everybody emotionally and yourself emotionally. Where is that balance? I know it's probably very individualized, but where is that balance between like fighting for everything to make sure you get exactly what you're entitled to versus fighting so much that you leave yourself emotionally, mentally depleted?
I look at it as a business deal cost benefit analysis.
Mhm.
If, let's say, there is a claim for a couple $100,000, but it will cost $50,000 to fight, 50 hours of time to prepare for the client and for, let's say, for the attorney, and the client makes money, that the cost opportunity is lost, meaning by using this time to fight for that money could be used to earn the money, then it doesn't make sense. The motivation is to get it right, to get what I deserve, versus taking a more ecological approach that is healthier.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, not to go after that, but go after more positive experience. And I haven't seen litigation being ever positive experience for anyone, even at the end when the client succeeds and they're so emotionally drained and exhausted that it doesn't feel. And in family law, there is no real win, because when they fight about move away or custody or domestic violence. So let's say someone is falsely accused of domestic violence and they won, but they already spent a couple $100,000 that they will probably never get because the other spouse doesn't have the money, even if they have prevailing party fees on paper. It feels exhausting 10 days in trial fighting over defending themselves. So I prefer, and I advise clients to go through, if possible, through collaborative mediation route first. And only then, and only when it doesn't work out, not because of them, because of the
Mhm.
other side.
Yeah.
If the other side becomes extremely unreasonable, and there are cases where it happens, when the other side says, I would like to take the children out of the country. There is no way that can be mediated if the positions are so extreme. I would like the children to stay in America. No, I would like to take the children 10,000 miles away. Had those cases too. Or I would like, because you did this to me, whatever it is, I would like 90% or 70% of all our say, and spousal support 50% of your salary, and negotiating hasn't worked out, so that's when trial happens. Or
Yeah.
domestic violence restraining orders end up in trial a lot.
Yeah.
So those cases are really, really tough to mediate.
So challenging to have all those factors in that and then try to live your life while while that's going on. Can imagine that's gotta be extremely hard, especially when there's things, we talk about children, like that is so many the main fixture of someone's world, and like to have that potentially be stripped away, it's got to be so emotionally a big emotional upheaval for so many people. And how do you navigate that dynamic with kids?
I personally would advise to not involve the children in any adult decisions, because at the end of the day, they're children and they are allowed to be children and not carry the weight of deciding who to live with and who to love more. And I know it's tempting sometimes for one parent to say, well, you see, he did this or she did this to us. We're together. And the bottom line, the child feels that because they're a product of both parents, if one parent is in the eyes of the other parent defective in any shape or form, then they feel defective. So it's like an insult on them.
Right.
And the parent who's saying that, they don't understand, because they see the other parent in that color, but they don't see how the child could feel, even if the child is not aware of that. That's what I heard child psychologists said, and I trust that. And I felt, I would say, as a child that way too. Although it's far away and it's hard to remember, but I think if possible, unless the children are 17, almost 18, and they already know what they want, and that's fine. But I'm talking about minor children, more like, between ages of 0 to 14, 15, to sort of allow them to have the space to be reassured that both parents are loving them, that they're going to be fine, they're going to be financially secure, the dynamic is going to change where they're going to live, but parents are friends, it's all going to be okay. So that cushion and security would feel much better to the children than you should decide who to live with and your parent is X and he did or she did this.
Yeah.
No blame, no shame, no guilt, just reassurance, security, stability.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing, because that can be so challenging for someone who's navigating the kids, and then you're also doing your own thing and trying to advocate for yourself, and how you allow that to all kind of go in a way that you honor the kids and what they need. So thank you for sharing your experience, because I think it's important for anyone who's navigating this to know what's best for the kids, and really honor that in the process of it. And one thing I want to talk about is safety, because this is something that so many women that listen to my podcast feel this like lack of inner safety. So they tend to outsource it, looking for people for validation, for, outside financial security and everything like that. How do you navigate someone who maybe just does not feel safe, but yet, and maybe not safe enough to advocate for themselves when they are going through a divorce?
Oh, it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
Where should I start? So the safety comes from the primary relationship as a child to the parents. So if someone was already raised in a way that they didn't have safety, they're looking to marry someone who will provide them safety. And naturally, when they go through divorce, the safety is going to be ripped under their feet. And so they will be looking for another person, different name tag, providing the same type of safety that they never had in the relationship and parent relationship. I would say from before even getting married, and I will answer a question in a divorce, before getting married, to realize that even putting all cards in one basket, trusting, still build your own basket, still build your own safety net, independency. Some people don't like to work, but at least having an account where there is investment, retirement, so that when things don't work out, it doesn't feel like a free fall from a high rise without parachute. So just having safety discussion from the get-go would be important for the young listeners who are planning to get married. But for the people who are going through divorce and don't have the safety and sort of too late type of mode, well, first thing to get is spousal support, to not wait, ask for pre-distribution of community property funds, because usually the person who pretends to give safety has all the control and potentially is exercising coercive control over finances, and is abusive in that way. So to take that power back by asking pre-distribute some funds for safety, spousal support, child support, attorney's fees should be number one priority. And then starting to develop skills to build their own safety by potentially hiring vocational evaluator, finding a fulfilling purpose to work or learn what someone wants. And I have a client who is going through a lengthy courses to become a therapist. That's another way to create. And I heard empowered stories where divorce was the best thing that happened because there is something that comes out of one person when they feel so desperate that they have nothing to lose and they go all in into something they really wanted for a long time, and then they become successful. So there is this two path to go, oh gosh, poor me. Yes, that's fine to be in that phase for a while, but then taking that power back and remember, who did I want to be? What do I want to do? I have talents. How can I implement those talents? What tools do I need? And that could be spousal support, that could be some money, that could be some time, that could be sending the children to the other parent 50% of the time so that the learning spouse can have time for themselves. Just taking life back.
Yeah, thank you so much
Empowering.
for sharing that because that is such a core to so many things to have that safety because that's once you feel safe, that's when you have that freedom to see life differently. And I really appreciate you sharing both those perspectives of people moving into marriage and also moving out of marriage and what that looks like for them and the options that they have, especially when you're in a space maybe you don't feel safe now, but to hear this, hopefully it'll open someone's eyes up to be like, okay, I do have options here, and this can be different for me.
And it could be also physical safety. If it's physical safety, of course, getting a restraining order and getting into safe at home program to have the address be confidential. And that's number one priority if the physical safety. So based on what safety types and needs are to address it right now, not wait a year later
Right.
or some I heard that victims tend to come back to the abuser, I think 7 times or 5 times during the, and then so have a therapist who will help not to go back.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, I know you talked about the team, having that team so that every aspect of that is taken care of for you. So I love that so that you know that you're not alone in all this because I would imagine could feel very lonely.
And the typical abuser would say that to destroy the team, divide and conquer. So they will attack the team. They will say, your therapist just wants the money, your lawyer wants the money, and they will attack in whatever shape or form. So the more you share about the qualities, the more information they have to attack and divide, even if they pretend to care about what happens with the lawyer, what happens with the therapist, what happens with the forensic accountant, they will then attack it so that they have more control.
Yeah. So what does communication look like for maybe someone who is going through divorce? Maybe they are co-parenting or there's certain situations like that. How much do you share with that person? How much do you keep for yourself when you're going through that?
I would say peaceful. There's this in domestic violence restraining order. There's this checkbox on the form DV 110 where it says exception for peaceful communication regarding custody and visitation. And I like that sentence because the communication needs to be ideally through a tool that it's easy to print and monitor called either Talking Parent app or our Family Wizard app. And the communication needs to be short, not too short, but peaceful and civil regarding the children. Ideally, avoiding any financial conversations because usually the more financially savvy party will trick or convince the other spouse who is for a reason in financially less privileged situation to sign something or to agree to something that is not benefiting them at the end of the day. So having that discussion only in mediation settings after accounting has been done, it's easier to negotiate when the spouse who now knows what community property would be after calculating post-separation accounting, stock option analysis, stocks analysis, spousal support analysis, child support analysis. When they know all of it, when they are informed, they can make a conscious decision to give up something in exchange for, let's say, more custody or visitation or leaving the country. People agree to financial structure, but allowing the other spouse to leave the country. So that's having that open-eyed, educated decision. That's all I hope for. Because lawyers, some people ask me, well, tell me, what should I do? And it's a position that I don't take lightly, because at the end of the day, I don't live that life. I don't live their life. So what I say to them, I am not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to provide options, and we can discuss pro and cons, and every option has its flip side. And then you can decide which option you would live with, and sort of give them their power back, and not take that parenting role and just, have them carry their own decision weight
Yeah.
on their own shoulders, because that's their life, and empowering them to start making decisions for themselves.
Yeah, it's such a powerful approach because, again, so many women who do abandon themselves do hand over their power unbeknownst to them for many years. So I love that you're giving them the power back of decision and choosing what's right for them in that. And I want to go shift it a little bit, because things obviously have changed in our world, and now we have AI. And I would imagine so many people who are contemplating divorce are maybe using AI to gain more information, and it can be useful. What are some of the upsides and downsides of using AI to understand how to proceed when you're getting a divorce?
AI is becoming a very, very powerful tool, obviously, for everything.
Yeah.
I myself use AI more than I ever used Google. Quick questions, rephrasing an email. It doesn't replace an attorney, because AI is trained to please and appease, and make hallucinations and mistakes. And so someone who is not equipped to prompt correctly will receive a biased AI response that hallucinates. And I see waves of filings of self-represented parties using AIs and hallucinations. And we are trained to read a lot. And so I'm immediately aware when someone is writing an AI. It's fine to write AI, but it needs to be verified for facts, for law, for everything. And then the other part is the sensitive personal information is leaking to this universal, uncontrollable somewhere. Right. And it also waives attorney-client privilege, which means if someone subpoenas the AI records, grok history, nothing there that was dropped, tax returns or email communications or personal information, is protected by privilege. Versus when a client writes an email to an attorney and asks the same question, that is protected by attorney-client relationship.
Yeah.
So there is a trade-off.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing, because I didn't know that, and that's really important to know, especially if you're going through anything like that, that what's protected, what's not, and how do what's real and what's not, because I think sometimes people look at AI as being complete truth, but not knowing the biases that exist in it. So it's really powerful. And I would love to hear, for you worked with so many clients. What is the one thing that, looking back and hearing client stories, that people say, I wish I knew that before they started going through a divorce?
It's not only I wished I knew that, is I wished I did that.
Yeah.
I wished I didn't get married. I wished I had a prenup. I wished I didn't have children with that person.
Yeah.
I wished I protected my separate property assets. So what happens when people get married, they're so in love, and whatever money they had, they put into joint accounts, they spend it, they buy homes, and then they don't have the records to trace it back, and it's all commingled. And later when they're going through divorce, they say, well, remember, I sold that house before marriage to buy this house we live in, and I want that money back. And there is that point of tracing. So if you want something to get back as your separate property, you got to prove it.
Yeah.
So that's That's one mistake, not discussing how the children would be raised, which country they would like to live. So if, let's say, they were in California temporarily, and now that the spouse wants to move 10,000 miles away, and that was discussed before they, I mean, these are
Yeah.
all, I feel like in school we learn history, we
Right.
learn math, but we don't learn the relationship skills,
Hmm.
how to choose a partner. But at the end, that's the most important decision in life. Why not spending time about two things I would add to school curriculum programs? Number one, relationship skills and money skills. I feel a lot of people
Couldn't
come
agree more.
out in credit card debts. You know, I saw in campus kids signing up for credit cards without knowing that this borrowed money is borrowed freedom. They're paying 30% APR. They feel like they can buy things, but then they're paying the banks.
Yeah.
And coming from living in Germany for 15 years, I didn't have credit cards until I came to America 6 years later. I didn't have an understanding. How can you spend money you don't have? It just
Hmm.
doesn't make any sense. And so other cultures have different, and I feel in America that's the part that doesn't make sense, to live life that is not aligned with what's there. And then in the relationship, and I feel like in all countries there's cultural influence, but also the skill set, how to communicate.
Yeah.
It's important to do that in business relationship and personal relationship and relationship with a child. So that skill set, how important is history versus relationship skills now?
Mhm. So true.
And
Yes.
so the last 20 years of my life, or maybe more, all I've been doing is catching up of about money, relationship, personal development, leadership, all of that. I think should have been part of the school curriculum.
Mhm. Absolutely, which is even so much more important, that you're proactive that, and I think every one of us have to be so proactive about learning what you need to function well in this life
Yeah,
versus
who
go ahead.
cares how many countries Genghis Khan conquered? You know?
Yes. Yes, for many it's not going to be pertinent to their everyday life of living a better life and having more
Yeah,
freedom and stability. Yes.
exactly,
Yes.
exactly.
I love to go so for someone who maybe is listening, they are either going through a divorce or have already gone through a divorce and look into the future. I imagine they would feel a lot of maybe fear of like getting into another relationship that could potentially become a marriage. How do you navigate that process of what you're leaving behind to what you're moving into, and how can you recognize signs of a relationship that is more sustainable and one that is more likely to last? I know it's probably a very loaded question there.
I would say before getting married, to learn oneself, how, what is important, what values are important in terms of religion, in terms of relationship values. You know, sometimes I had clients who said the spouse told them they would like to be polyg- polygamous, or
Mhm.
I cannot pronounce this word. So
Polygamous? Yeah.
polygamous, being with other people that they haven't discussed before marriage,
Mm.
or the sex drive. What is the expectation in terms of money sharing? Would they share their accounts? And so all these topics come later as a surprise.
Mm.
So I
Mhm.
think it would be good to make a list of values and important deal breakers, and know how, because sometimes when people are so young they're like, oh, I don't care, I don't care, I don't care, and then they do care, because that's
Mhm.
when they end up in my office and have these issues
Right.
that they
Yeah.
haven't discussed that they care
Mhm.
about.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate sharing because again, it is one of those things that like you don't realize it. you called it like a business partnership. And if you were, I love that example because if you were entering a business with someone, you would go into all those details. But because there's so much emotion in it and it's a relationship, it can very much get left aside. So I love that perspective of recognizing the importance of that, knowing what you want and knowing what aligns with you.
And also, depending on how the other person responds to some of the answers, for example, if it's someone who expects the other spouse to pay for everything, and if that's a resentful point for the paying spouse, then maybe that's not going to work out.
Right. Yeah.
Or if being fit is important and the other spouse eats a pound of ice cream every night, that's another thing
Right.
to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, yeah, that's, it's so important to see what are some of those conversational points to bring into it before jumping into making a commitment that then can be really, you're linked to until you separate from that. So, yeah, I think
Exactly.
it's just really good to hear those points because I think, again, it's something that's not as widely known, and people enter these agreements with others and don't realize what they're actually signing up for until they kind of get too far into it.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I love it. You've shared so much insight, so much value, and I know it's going to help anyone who's either entering marriage or leaving a marriage. And I'm so grateful for everything you shared. And can you share with where people can connect with you, your book again, and how can they find you?
If they type in Google divorce like a boss, they will find me. I have YouTube channel called Divorce Like a Boss, Amazon book in 4 formats called Divorce Like a Boss. And in the YouTube, there are all links to my website and how to schedule an appointment with me, romanovlaw.com.
Amazing. I'll put everything in the show notes. And again, I'm so grateful for everything you shared. I know it's going to really help someone who's listening. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, for anyone listening, if you found value in this conversation, you know someone who really needs to hear it, please share this episode with them. Thank you so much for being here.